My guest today is Antony Ball, someone I've known for a quarter century, I think. Gosh, that makes us sound very old, doesn't it, Antony? But of course we're not. Antony is probably the leading private equity player in South Africa, has been since the late 1990s, and he's now also working in Europe. And he's particularly interesting to me because he's a very rare breed, which is a really nice person who is also a moneybags or a private equity person. So, Antony, welcome, and nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Richard.
Antony, what do you think makes for a successful private equity person or a successful venture capitalist? What are the key characteristics or anatomy of that sort of person?
Well, first of all, Richard, thank you very much for those kind words. It is about 25 years ago, and it seems like eons ago. I don't feel like we are any older, unless you look at pictures of ourselves. You'll find that we are.
That's why we're doing audio.
That's why we're doing audio, I guess. And really enjoyed our time working together, learned an awful lot. One of the things that Richard may tell you is I'm not a good advice taker, so a lot of the good advice he's given me, I haven't taken. Most of that's to my own detriment. I think that a venture capital, private equity people are, in some senses, quite different. And I talk VC as the Americans talk VC, meaning early stage. I know in UK we often lump them all together. But VC animals and PE animals are often quite difficult. So let me talk rather about the animals that I know, which are the private equity ones.
Okay.
And I think that the private equity people, to make them really work, I feel, requires the following. I think first off, what is often underestimated is just the power of the team. So it's very rare that you find one person that can do all the stuff on their own. And certainly a lesson for me in the different environments that I've done my work in, I find myself much less effective when I'm on my own than when I'm in a team. So I think the whole aspect of the team, how it works, the different attributes, how you make that work is quite a tough job. But I think getting it right is a very, very important part of what makes any particular private equity individual effective. And Richard, you and I have been through times at Brace where I often felt that I tell people that the place nearly blew up 3 times. So it just because of the personalities. So certainly we didn't always get it right, but I feel we got it right in the end. And I suppose what I'm saying here is that an awful lot of time, energy, and intellectual energy, and needs to go into trying to make that team thing work. So I think the team is very important. The individuals in that team, I think the people that do it best are people that bring together a few strands of capability and competence that are very important. The one, obviously, is the person's got to be clever. It is an environment where you've got lots of things coming at you, lots of competing pieces of information that don't always point in the same direction, and you've got to try and make sense of. So I think just intellectual horsepower is quite an important feature. You'll find that most of the people that do this, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but I think that it tends to be quite intelligent people. So I think that's something that we focused on in our hiring always has been to try and find clever people. The other part that comes with that, and it doesn't always come naturally, is the human dimension of being emotionally intelligent, a bit of a catchword, but just being smart around people and trying to win with people, trying to get people to do stuff, trying to get people on side. The people that successful private equity people generally have a way of doing that. And it normally combines a bit of force of personality, but also with some humanity about understanding how people work and what makes them tick. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle that I think is very important. And then the last piece I'll talk to you, and it becomes more meaningful to me and more obvious to me the older I get, is that I don't know what the right English word is, but it's some kind of shrewdness or cunning that is needed. Cunning can sound pejorative. In actual fact, in the world of investing, having the right amount of cunning is an important thing. Is invariably what one's trying to do here is to win, and you're wanting to do better, and you're wanting to take advantage of the situations that you find yourselves in. So there's a trade that I call cunning, that I always look for in the people that I work with. So you add those things together, I think you've got something to work with.
You haven't mentioned something that many people think is quite important, and that is a methodology or a set of principles or a specialization in a particular area. You've talked about the attributes of the people, and I think it's very hard for me to disagree with anything that you said there. But doesn't that leave out the sort of the beef, as it were, the stuff which determines how you select companies that are going to increase in value and how you help them do that?
Yeah, no, look, I think that's important. I suppose I'd put it somewhere in that cunning bucket. But what I'd also say, though, that I would hazard a bet that most of the successful private equity firms and people are probably deal people first and investment people second. That'd be an observation I'd make. And that is that if one spends time with serious investors, they're generally public market people, there's an awful lot that goes into figuring out investment themes and sectors and what kind of industries have tailwinds, what kind of industries have headwinds. My experience with private equity people, it normally starts the other way. You find a deal and you kind of bash it into shape, leverage it, make a few changes, and the investment themes are often quite secondary to that. So, which is fine, but I'm not convinced that you have to be a super shrewd investor to win in the private equity game. In fact, as I say, a lot of these people are, with some humility, would say, second-tier investors, but just first league, smart, cunning people that are able to take advantage of situations. And sometimes they're buying a business cheap, putting the right amount of leverage into it, finding someone that's happy to pay more than it's worth when you sell it, and those sorts of trades. As far as methodology is concerned, I think a lot of firms will pump up, their methodology and why it's different. But fundamentally, it's 101 stuff. It's DCF models, it's analytical tools, it's really all the stuff that business schools produce that comes out, and it's then people and with those attributes that actually use those tools to advantage.
When you think about the companies that you have invested in, or the deals that you've done, perhaps I should say, which have been most successful and which have made the most money for yourself and for other investors who are limited partners, do you think that the major theme of that success is to do with the business characteristics, the market, the market position, the way that the company approaches its customers and so forth, and the way it runs itself to make either fantastic products or to make them very, very cheaply? Do you think that that's more important or less important than the personal characteristics and creativity of the people who are running the company? How do you divide the importance of those two components, Antony?
Very interesting point, Richard. And in fact, it's probably both of those things. Personal disposition-wise, I end up being very intrigued by the latter, and that is the exceptional leader, entrepreneur that's built something that's really special and has some unique insights and ability to mobilize resources, bring people along, do new things. That would be, I guess, your ultimate source of value, and those are the sorts of ones that I've enjoyed the most and probably done best at. But another way of looking at this is to have a look at the whole private equity value chain, which starts from buying, structuring, working with a portfolio company, and exiting. And you may find that the most money actually gets made not even from that little bit. It might be that you've lucked out and found something that's just extraordinarily cheap, and you've got to be a real chump not to make a lot of money out of it. That can also happen. Or you may find the next bit is it's how you structure it. You came up with a really clever structuring tool that took all the risk away and provided only the upside. And again, you can have inferior outcomes in terms of the entrepreneur that you work with or the team that you work with. or it may be that you just, again, get very lucky that somebody really needs to buy this asset and they're happy to pay a crazy price for it. But I think your most reliable way of consistently making money, in my view, is where you end up working with an extraordinary leader that's got insight and vision and ability to take people along and make big and bold things happen.
Now, it's very interesting, Antony, that you used the phrase extraordinary leader, or exceptional leader. You used the phrase earlier. And is there a sort of contradiction, or is there an explanation for why you said leader and not team in that case, or leader, not leaders? And when we were talking about the making private equity work for the private equity firm, you adopted the opposite position of saying it's the power of the team rather than saying it's an exceptional individual. Now, that may be humility on your part, undeserved humility perhaps, but do you think there's a contradiction there, or do you think that there is something in the nature of the company that you buy which is different from the nature of the private equity firm which is managing the whole process?
Look, I think you're right in the sense that, and you asked me in the beginning about what makes a special private equity person professional. I was just wanting to put that person in the context of a team. So you'd want, yes, in that team to have a leader that leads and visions and takes the company. You absolutely need that. So I didn't want to downplay the role of a leader in that context either. But if you're just talking about the others in that team, I think the team dynamics important. Industrial commercial business is similar in some respects, but where it's different is in the private equity businesses. You've got a set of partners, all of whom go out, and it's almost like what you describe it is. It's almost like it is a bit like a partnership where you've got partners that actually run these investments for you. When you're in a typical industrial commercial environment, it's the typical role of a CEO and then functional heads or business unit heads. It's somewhat different, but where it becomes, I think, irrelevant to your question is a great leader will build a powerful team, always. They understand the power of people. They're able to harness people. They're able to get the very best out of their people. That has been my experience. The very best leaders are extraordinarily good at that. That's one of the defining things that I think makes them special.
Have you ever been in, that's a great answer. Have you ever been in a position, Antony, where maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe longer or maybe shorter, into doing a particular deal, you discover that you don't have faith anymore in the people who are running the company? They may be very good functionally, they may be really nice people, they may be highly intelligent people, but somehow it doesn't seem to come together. Have you ever been in that position, and what have you done about it?
So, all too often, Richard, I'm afraid. I think that one of them, it's what can happen. I mean, it happens often. I think that for a few reasons. One is a person's life circumstances can change. And I have a lot of examples of where people have been going along fine, but they've had a changed life circumstance which has just made them behave differently. It may be that the business environment changes and those things that were relevant to that environment are now no longer relevant. Or it may be that someone just made a few mistakes. And it may even be that you, as someone that's representing the owners, end up losing confidence, and for some reason, for one reason or another. So it does happen quite often. What we found is that you need to make changes, and we try to make those changes thoughtfully and quickly. And I recall a lesson I learned when I started out, and my former partner Terry, we had a group of senior business people around the lunch table. And I remember asking the question, I said, what is your, leave us just one enduring lesson. What is it? And to a person, they all said the same thing. They ran out of confidence in someone running the business, and they took too long to make the change. Yeah. And they found every time they did make the change, that all the things that they were worried about, the personal hurt, the fracturing of commercial relationships, the loss of corporate memory, all of those things were actually dwarfed by the new energy that came in. So that's something that we've tried to follow, is to as I often say to my team, is we don't behave like Clint Eastwood here. Don't go and shoot everyone's head off before you've thought about it. But if you've resolved that this is wrong, is make the change and take the pain and move on. And it's a lesson I'm pleased I learned quite early on in life.
So essentially, it's bringing in someone new to run the company from outside the company, or sometimes from inside the company?
It's normally been outside.
Yeah.
It's normally been outside.
And what do you recommend doing with the people who, in a sense, have not been able to make it work? Do you think, in general, it's a good idea to keep them because of all their experience and their functional skills? Or do you think it's better if they leave?
I think the best is to cut them loose. I think what one always tries to do is to work very hard to have as amicable an outcome as you can. And there's always a lot of emotion, a lot of heat around these things, so it can be quite tough to do that. But you also got to convince yourself of this, and that is if the person is wrong, it's so wrong for all those people around them, and it's so wrong for that person, because they're going to end up now, messing up time and time again, have their self-confidence eroded, lose economic opportunity. So the best you can actually do is to get the person out. So I think the conversations, once you've got through the heat of emotion, I find more often than not we end up in a reasonably comfortable place afterwards, and you find the person does get cut loose, close the ties, but you've got access to the person if you need some corporate memory or you need to ask a question. You've always got access to them afterwards. And I would feel that of those changes that have been made, I would feel that a good 80% of them, we've still at a place where we can have a cup of coffee or lunch with that person once the emotions out of the situation. That's something one should work quite hard to try and achieve, I feel.
Okay, so you recommend surgery, basically. The surgeon has to go in with a knife and has to behave clinically.
So.
Yeah, okay, very good. Could you tell me what you think that you've learned that's most important, the one or two or three things that are most important about business, about private equity, or about life generally, actually, if you want to go that far? In the last 5 or 10 years, I mean, one of the great things I think about living and about working in business of any sort is that you learn things, and sometimes learn that your assumptions are completely wrong, or that you find a different way of behaving, which is really very refreshing and which seems to work extremely well. What would you say you've learned in the last 5 or 10 years, Antony, that you think is very important?
I think, so we all bring our own stuff to these sorts of conversations. And for me, a very big one has been this very human thing of people remaining fundamentally what they are. So once you bait, so let's say once you get through your teen years, you end up remaining fundamentally the same person. So the things that scare you or excite you or make you nervous and your stress behavior remains the same. So I remember having this brief chat with you once. So it would get to don't ask Donald Trump to be anything other than a New York property thug.
Yeah, I remember that. I knew that was coming because that thought really struck me.
And don't ask your prime minister to be anything other than what he is. If that's what he is, or Jacob Zuma to be anything other than what Jacob Zuma is. Yeah. And all of that stuff is quite baked in how you are. So I find that it's very important to try and figure that stuff out in the partners that you have, in the CEOs that are going to run your companies, the people you're relying on, is to try and figure that stuff out, and not be surprised about it, and recognize it when it rears its head, and know when you can use the person a certain way and when you can't. So I certainly find that's a massive lesson for me, and I try all the time to go to the ends of the earth to discover that stuff. Be it through psychometrics.
But what do you do? I mean, I think the Trump case is a very good example. I think you're absolutely right. He wrote, or at least was ghosted for him, a book called The Art of the Deal, and he views everything as a transaction, everything as a deal, and he tries to buy low and sell high, etc. But what do you do in a situation where that person becomes president of the United States, where it's a totally inappropriate way of behaving, but just the wrong person in the wrong job? how do you deal with that? I mean, either in your own experience, obviously it's different, but how should the GOP, the Republican Party, or how should the Americans deal with something like that?
I won't go there because it's too complicated for me. I'm just happy to think about this at an organizational level. Investing there is not a democracy.
That's too difficult, Bob.
It's too difficult. So I'm fascinated by this stuff. That's to me an enduring lesson. Another enduring lesson for me, and people can come from different philosophical points on this thing. If I talk to, for example, my friends in the asset management world are all the kids that were top of the class in finance, and they sit behind their desks and their laptops, and they don't engage with the world. They engage with numbers and stuff they read. And there's almost a belief that with an investment, you don't have to do anything. The truth will out. So if there's value there, you don't have to make it chase it out. It'll, on its own, it'll reveal itself.
And you don't believe that that's true?
I don't believe that. I believe the agency of people is all that matters.
Yeah.
It's through the agency of people that you actually that good and bad things happen. So I'm a deep believer in this thing about people and teams of people and extraordinary people, and trying to get them organized in the right way to do exceptional things. And for me, one of the big highs I get from the work that I do is working with these kind of people as people in my team, or people, my partners, or people that run companies where there's some extraordinary human trait in there that when it expresses itself, it does great things. So
does that mean that does that mean that you think that analysis is for the birds and actually it's all a matter of intuition?
No, not at all. No. I think analysis really matters because those are the facts, and they've got to be your guiding principles. You can't change the laws of gravity. But if you were to, but where it matters is, let's say you do an analysis of a company and you say, goodness, it's got this unit that's greatly undervalued, and analysis will get you there. But the outcome is extract it for your investors and make money out of it. That's human, and that's the part that is so difficult.
And that's the part which is both more difficult and also more variable in terms of one person will sort it out and someone else just won't be able to do that.
No, exactly. I've got one of the entrepreneurs that I admire the most that I've worked with over the years. He's an extraordinary entrepreneur that's actually had a lot of. He can operate on the street and in the boardroom. Very capable guy, and he's got this thing that he keeps on telling people is that opportunity goes across everyone's radar screen, and it goes across every clever person's radar screen. Yet it's few that are able to recognize it, seize it, and make it their own. And he's absolutely right, and that reinforces my view about the agency of people. You can have brilliant people that do all analysis, and you can have someone that's not quite as smart, but has got the instincts and the shrewdness and the cunning, and that same opportunity can go past, and guess who's going to get it and make it their own? Yeah. It's the person that's got the smarts and the cunning that will actually get there.
I think that's a great metaphor, that the opportunity goes across everyone's radar screen, and few people recognise it. And that's one of the things that I have learned in the last 5 or 10 years is that actually the ability to see something that's an opportunity where everyone else misses it. I mean, it's a really interesting characteristic, and it's not a matter of necessarily high intellectual power. It can be a sudden insight or a realisation, imagination. It's very interesting. Anthony,
Let me throw that back at you. Sorry, I want to throw back at you. What is the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 5 years?
I think one of the problems that I have had in my life is I've always wanted to control things. And I think you and I had some disagreements sometimes, because you were meant to be running a company and I was a non-executive director. And you said that you sometimes didn't listen to what I said. Well, that's quite appropriate, but because it was your judgment that ultimately had to carry the responsibility in the can. So I think one of the things that I've learned to do in the last few years, or at least hope I've done, is to treat life more as an adventure than as something which needs controlling, because controlling is not much fun. I mean, you can control things and be very effective if you're someone like Lenin or Stalin or even someone like Mao or Hitler. But actually, it's jolly hard work, and it's not much fun, and it's not much fun for the people around you. It's much better to treat life as an adventure, I think. And that also fits very much with the opportunity going across everyone's radar screen, that actually the key thing is to spot where, the next adventure can come completely randomly, completely discontinuously from previous experience or previous contacts. And I think that's exciting, because it keeps the curiosity going, and it keeps the mind going, and it's fun. It's a game. So that's my little contribution. Anthony, we've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'd just like to close by asking you about South Africa. I know that you feel very deeply about your native country. I know that you are, very interested in the drama which is playing out, and in the success or otherwise of the country. Are you optimistic about that? And do you think that the country is on track? It went through an enormous transition, obviously, in 1994 from a really nasty nationalist government, and we had Mandela, we had democracy come in, and all the rest of it. Do you think that South Africa is basically on the right road or not?
You're right. Thank you, Richard. I feel very privileged to be part of this fascinating place and all it has to offer. I often say to people, as a South African, you're on a roller coaster of emotion, of pride, joy, and despair. And you can have all of those things happen to you in the same day, based on what you're seeing and what you're talking to. I have to say, if you to do a rational analysis of the South African situation, you would include things like ballooning debt. This is called the fiscal position of South Africa is very poor and very weak. The economic growth rate anemic. The politics toxic. Crime and corruption, at very serious levels. You've got a government that is anti-business. I think a lot of governments are, particularly if there are any leftist tendencies. They don't really like business, but we've got one that doesn't really like business. And we've got a whole lot of stuff that's very complicated, and where the indicators are pointing downwards rather than upwards. So I think if you take a rational analysis of South Africa, you've got to say, to answer your question, no, we're not on the right path. So we agonize over that a lot, and what sort of keeps you here and motivated is hope, is a kind of belief and a hope, and that things can turn. But at the moment, things are looking pretty rough all around in South Africa.
And can you see any escape routes? I mean, can you see a scenario in which sooner or later you do get a government which is not anti-business, you do get the problem of toxic politics and crime and corruption and the weak fiscal position and the poor economic growth sorted out? Can you see the sunlit uplands despite the dire position?
Well, I suppose the sunlit uplands for me is probably just a bit more of a realistic lower bar expectation. So it would be one where we can get the economy to grow at about 3%, where we can reduce the levels of crime and corruption, where we can reduce some of the dysfunctionality in the politics, and that South Africa, when I say muddles along, it kind of muddles along, but better than we are at the moment. And in that context, one can have a life in a business and make some contribution to what happens. I don't have a belief that it can be sunlit uplands. If you have a look at the National Development Plan, which I think was drawn up about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was a very rational plan that basically says, if you can grow this economy at 5.6% per annum for 20 years, you end up becoming a middle-income country where unemployment goes from 25% to 10%. That was something that I genuinely believed was possible. and we had all the elements for it. But we veered so far off that course. We haven't had a single year where we've had 5.6% growth since then. I would hazard a bet that it's been probably 1.5% average over that period of time. So I think that opportunity has been lost. And so then you get into, what is possible. Given all these problems and complexities, it's a low growth rate and not as good an outcome, but it's one that I'm happy to be part of, happy to live in. As my kids keep on reminding me with all of our challenges here, some of these challenges are common to most countries in the world. We just have a more extreme case of it here. And what's real about that is when you interface with that, you can help make a difference, try and do things, try and get involved, and try and improve matters in a more significant way than one could in many other countries. So that's one of the things that keeps us here. It keeps us motivated to try and do what we can to make a difference.
Well, I hope that it does keep people there. I mean, the danger, of course, is that people like you then decide to seek fortune and change elsewhere rather than in the country that you know and love. So let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I hate to end on a slightly downbeat note, but thank you very much indeed for being very frank with us. I know that you need to go now, and I try and keep my podcast to 30 minutes. We've done 32 minutes and 47 seconds, and every second has been a great pleasure, Antony. So thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking, and I hope to see you before too long. We don't normally get to see people very easily these days, but anyway, that would be a great pleasure when it's possible.
Thank you, Richard. Delighted to talk to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye now, Antony. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.